Livestream number 39. We are in a different place today. My lady wife is next door in the usual place where I do my live stream. She's speaking to a friend who's from Bulgaria, funnily enough. And so I am in the kitchen today. We're going to be talking about the cheapest cars that you ever bought in your life. I suppose that most of those cars will be from some years ago now. We've had very high second-hand car prices for quite some time in this country. Just going to get the live stream up on my other account, which is on my other computer here. It's not actually come on yet. That's very interesting. Yes, oh, there it is. Okay, so let's put that computer on mute and start it on here. It's much easier to kind of keep track of the comments and things that come through if I'm actually on this other device here. So good evening to Simone from Hooked on Classics. Good evening to Mr. Paulie Galtieri. So yes, yesterday I went down to the Bournemouth area and I drove something that I've been wanting to drive something like this for quite a long time. A 2005 Renault Clio Mark II that had been bought with a year's MOT in 2022 for £100. Is it possible to buy a car with an MOT for £100? Yes, apparently so. And that's why it's going to be appearing on the austerity edition of No Budget Reviews very soon. You might even get to see that next week if you behave yourselves, which I'm sure that you will. That's good. Right, have a bit of lager. What other comments have we had so far? Julian Knight, a channel member. Good evening to you, sir, all the way from Hamburg. Simon Lot 76 Cars, good evening to you as well, sir. That's not my name, very good. Says good evening, sir. And Simone likes the sound of No Budget Reviews Austerity Edition. Yes, we haven't done Austerity Edition since 2020, so it's good to do. I might even have a second car for Austerity Edition coming up. Now, the cars that you find these days for, £100 or so with an MOT, they don't tend to come on the open market. They tend to come through contact if you're a dealer or, I don't know, a family member selling a car. And I think that's how this thing sort of came about, really. It's just more about it in the review, which I sent over to the owner of the car, and he seems to like it. So there we go. So Russell says good evening to everyone. Good evening, sir. Psycho63, also a channel member, says good evening from a not so glamorous Woking. I spent about an hour in Woking on Friday. Actually, I was waiting for the train to actually come. That I had my train ticket booked on. I had booked some cheap tickets, and I was a bit early getting to Woking for my train change. So I spent about an hour at Woking Station on Friday. Richard Hart says he was watching a shuffle from the Classic Car Show. We did interrupt the shuffle from the Classic Car Show because I also recorded a shambolic shuffle this very morning over at Thruxton. And I find if I don't like that, don't get up very quickly, it kind of loses relevance, something like that. Whereas Classic Car Show, there's so many parts of it that it can, 3 parts are already up out of 5. You can sort of take a temporary break, and then obviously 4 and 5 will be up tomorrow and on Tuesday. Simone says the Cortina interior, that's TC, her Cortina, is pure austerity. Yes, it's an L or something, isn't it, Simone? Pluto Motors Blackpool says, good evening, everyone. Good evening, sir. Psycho63 says, I work on the railway. There was nothing wrong. I bought these cheap tickets to get me to Kensington Olympia and back, and I had to wait. I got to Woking too early to go on the train without getting, caught fare dodging, so I had to wait. It was fine. I don't mind waiting at Woking Station. There are worse places than that, really. Um, Russell Hunter says, isn't working in a place with the tripod? Yes, it's one of the Martian war machines from War of the Worlds. That's Horsell. I think Horsell Common is near Woking. And that's the place where War of the Worlds actually starts the book. I can't remember. I think it was published in 1898, and H.G. Wells lived in that area for a while. That's why I think he was so familiar with it. I'm sure that Psycho 63 will tell me more about that kind of thing. Max says, good evening, Mr. Lloyd and company. Good evening to you, sir. Vladimir Potilov says, good evening. Good evening to you, sir. Simone says that TC is not even an L. It's just a nothing. It's a base model. I think originally it was a 1.3 or something, wasn't it? And now it's a 1.6. Simon from Lots of Cars says, I saw some criticism of the London show, but it wasn't that big and there are no trade stands. There were trade stands there. There were whole dealerships there, like the Devonshire Motor Company and Absolute Classics and things that were there. In terms of like trade stands selling, I don't know, some merchandise, there were some of those there. Yeah, there was some of those there. To be fair though, it wasn't very big. And it's far, I knew it wasn't going to be massive because I've been to two of them, no, three of them I've been to before. And 2018, 19 and 2021, and I knew it wasn't going to be massive, so I didn't book, hotels or stay with somebody or go for more than a day, because I did the whole thing in, I don't know, I got there at 12 and it opened, and I was done by 3:15 or something. It was all finished, and NEC, it hasn't happened. You're there. The entire time, between 13 and 22 Shambolic Shuffles will be filmed at the NEC next month. That will take multiple days. Pluto Motors Blackpool says, makes my Excel look like the height of luxury. Yep, base models, lovely. C says, what's that rag hanging down the wall behind the right shoulder? That's I think, sort of my lady wife's laundry. I'm not in the usual place I'd normally doing live streams today, I'm afraid. Max says, I maybe have another interesting 45 to you to borrow, for you to borrow in a couple of months, if you're interested. A 1.6 Classic SE with a red velour personal line interior. Sir, that might be just the right time to drive another 45. Simone, I think, is talking to Pluto Motors Blackpool about Mark III Cortinas. Psycho 63 says, I think Woking's greatest export was Paul Weller, who lived on Stanley Road. Woking's kind of, I think, most noticeable for that enormous railway station. Yeah. So, yeah, there we go. I think, and of course, War of the Worlds and things. I don't know much else about Woking, to be honest. Paulie Gattieri asked a question that I'm getting an awful lot at the moment. Have you moved on with C70? Have you decided on another Volvo model to replace it with? All will be revealed, sir. There's a very vague vlog coming up about this question in a couple of weeks if you're not on the higher 2 members of the channel membership, in which case you would have already seen that. Yeah, it'll happen at the right time. Pluto Blackpool, this is the face of Mark III Cortinas. I think they came out around 73 from memory. He says, the face-fitted Cortinas, even the base model got carpet. Wow. Simone, are you saying that your car doesn't actually have fitted carpets in it? I have been in some like that before, but there's not many. I know the Mark II Escort Popular didn't have fitted carpets in it either, because my parents tested one of those in the 70s. It didn't have them. So I knew that. I didn't realise the Cortina was like that too for the base model. That's what my name says. Are you going to buy a Rover 75? I'm not going to talk about this speculative thing because there's not much point really, is there? The answer to that question is I'm not going to say anything about it. Simone says decadent capitalist, yeah, with luxury seats and all that sort of thing in cars. Lot 26 cars. Simon says, I was doing some research on Proton for a video, came across the Impian. What a rare and decent looking car. It was called the Wajir in Malaysia, the Impian. It wasn't called the Impian over there. We obviously, well, as Richard Hammond pointed out in a video many years ago, the Wajir probably wasn't the best name for a car in this country because it sounds a bit rude somehow. I've never driven an Impian. It's based on the same platform as a Volvo S40, the Mitsubishi Charisma, and the Mitsubishi Space Star, which is crazy. JDM Stone Monkey says something very correct. Yeah, McLaren's headquarters it's near Woking. Yeah, it's not in the town centre or anything. It's outside, but yeah, it's near there. Max says something very pertinent. No carpet is an impressive level of poverty spec. It is indeed. I don't think I'm trying to think of a car that didn't have carpets in it. I'm sure there are some. I can't think of any right now. I can't think of any. I'm sure there are some. Simone says TC only has carpet at the transmission tunnel. Wow, crazy. Paulie Galtieri says something that's a bit more kind of along the lines of what we would like. Beige Wilton carpet to match a beige leather interior and Burville walnut veneer trim. Yes, sir, that's much better. Max says, someone who does them every day, yes, down at DMGRS, I'd rather have a 45 or a 75. The reason I have a 45 is because I think I prefer it too. I think that's all I have to say. I've driven 75s, I've driven ZTs, but I just prefer mine. That's just the way that it is. Caesar Sainsbury's Crown Lager, yes, indeed. Cyclic TV says, we often watch the final checks on McLarens from a track above one of their sites. That's handy, isn't it? Being like something who has perks of a job. Pluto Motors Blackpool says, the Proton Impian, I've completely forgotten about that. Yes, most people have. Like virtually any Proton model now, apart from the original ones, the 1.3, 1.5s, are really forgotten in this country now. Russell says, lots of XXXIX cars. I came close to buying an Impian a few years ago. Gold with brown leather interior. I found it less than comfortable though. Wow, that's an interesting spec, isn't it? Mind you, the sort of person who would have bought an Impian back in the day, I think was maybe the kind of person who'd like gold with brown leather interior. Max says, I love the V75, but BMW influence made it problematic to own. Mechanically, the 45 is a much tougher car. Possibly. Mr. Coleman, Roach Mechanic, says that sort of thing too. I like the size of the 45 more, 75. It feels like a much smaller car because it is, and I like the sort of Honda setup it has in it because it's essentially just a a variant on the early 90s Honda Civic, the generation that spawned the EG6 and things like that. It's very similar underneath for 45 to one of those, and you can modify it if you want, or you can just leave it standard like I do. And the way it's set up to drive is very different from the 75 or ZT. The only things that they tend to have in common are things like the engines and some of the gearboxes, and nothing else is in common at all. I think the wing mirrors might be actually in the 45s, but I can't really think of many other parts that are in common apart from the engines and gearboxes really. So if the engineering terms, they're completely different. Paulie Gatturi, this is yes, this is the one I found at Fruxton today, the Shambolic Shuffle. I couldn't believe the size of the new Ford Pumas. You have the Puma STs. I can't believe there's actually a club for those already. Considering how new they are. Parked next to the Triumph Spitfire. Yeah, yeah, a little Spitfire. Crazy. I think it was a GT6 maybe. There was also a Spitfire there too. There were both of them there today. Lot of XXXIX cars is Russell Hunter. I'm drawn to the styling of the Proton Impian. Henry Green says, did Protons have counter-rotating engines? I couldn't answer that myself. I can't remember which side the gearbox is on. If the gearbox is on the left, it tends to be a counter-rotating engine in a front-wheel drive car. If it's on the right, it's like the normal way that most cars are. Not so only 6 cars. Simon says, what happened to new car colours? No golds, greens, just black, silver or grey. Now, you can get golds and greens on certain cars. I've seen them. I think the Skodas still do a nice dark green, but they tend to be less common, I think, than they used to be. Certainly the colours in the 80s and 90s were much more. But dark green was a very popular car colour back in the day, and these days you hardly ever see it. For example, it's a shame because it's my favourite colour for a car, and I'm wearing a jumper to match. Russell Hunter says, fun fact, Impians were once used by homicide police. Yes, they absolutely were. JDM Snow Monkey says, well, the 45 kept much more of a Honda lineage. Yes, it did. There's no Honda lineage at all in the 75. There's absolutely none. Lots of BMW bits in those, although it wasn't based on the same platform as the 5 Series. That's not true. It was its own platform. But there's lots of BMW engineering there because BMW owned the company. It's very simple as that. That's not my name. So I saw a 45 drove much better than the same MB Civic. The thing is, I've driven an MB Civic. Max actually, I think he still owns it, unless he sold it now. I drove that last year on the channel, and I don't know. I think I've got a V6 45, and they are just sort of better than the 4-cylinder ones. They're just a bit better, apart from the fuel economy and the extra parts issues that come with owning a V6 45. They're the best example, and so they never put a V6 engine into the 5-door Civics. They didn't put one in. So unless you want to actually make yourself a 45 V6 Tourer, which you could do, you just need to find a donor car, which would be the Civic Aerodeck, which are quite rare now. You could make yourself a 45 V6 Tourer if you really want to. People have made quite a few 4-cylinder 45 Tourers, or 400 HHR Tourers, I should say, but both of them exist. Max says I should clarify my suspension. Certified suspension dissolved. Yeah, it's because it's kind of got these two bits that meet, which bits of aluminium meeting steel, and it tends to cause galvanic corrosion. Mr. Coleman explained that to me. The 45 is much easier to work on. It probably is. Even a V6 45 is easier to work on a 75 V6 because of the crash structure in front of the engine bay. Mr. Coleman is actually here, so he can add to this discussion we're having. I'm sure that he will have plenty to say. So Max says that's what name. The 45 is a better drive than the MB, but slightly better damped, and the steering is a bit sharper. Yeah, possibly. The MB that I drove was, I think, a 1.6 executive, actually, that had the beige leather interior in it, which we do enjoy. We do like a nice beige leather interior on this channel. Political Motor Blackpool says, I'd love a 75, but decent ones are hard to come by or expensive. It depends. I mean, when Mike Humble tried to sell his 75 last year, it's a 2-litre V6 Connoisseur SE, which was in Copperleaf. It's a very early Longbridge built car. He had quite some trouble selling it, actually. He didn't even want much money for it, but for some reason people didn't want to give it to him. It was a very good car, that. So I think it depends, really. Max says, the Honda would a couple of weeks ago, very happy new owners. Yes, I'm not surprised they're happy. I'd be very happy too with that, actually, myself. The Lizzie Man is actually kind of talking about the topic we're supposed to be talking about. Let's just get onto that in a little while, which is about the very cheapest cars you've ever bought in your life with an MOT. He says, my first car was a minivan, £100 in 79, and I bought a Skoda Estelle in 86 for £120. So yeah, there we go. Mark from Bad Book says, good evening, sir. Matt W says, hello, sir. Got some more channel members on here. Simone says, should I get my bonnet resprayed due to lack appeal and the passenger's sill repaired because it hit a rock? It's expensive, was £800. I know the values of a 75 are still relatively low. I think it depends what sort of 75 that you have. Maybe Mr. Coleman or Max can answer a question like that. Mr. Coleman's very good at that sort of thing. Project MGTF says, "Hey up, people of the interwebs. Good evening, sir." JDM Snow Monkey says, "The price of those 90s Civic liftbacks have definitely risen of late." Yeah, there used to be no budget reviews like all day. All day, those were no budget reviews cars. Now, like nice ones are a bit more. Matt W says, "I have a preference to the Honda-based Rovers." I do as well personally for some reason. And Mark from Bad Book says, "Hello to Project MGTF." Simone says, "Hello to Simon, not into its cars." No, sorry, it can't be. It must be another Simon. Got more than one Simon on the live stream tonight then. Paulie Arturi says, "Have you fixed the door cards with the 45? No. We've got other things to think about before we start doing that, sir. I'm afraid. The wood trim was dropped in from the Project Drive times, which started around 2001 Project Drive. Project MGTF says, "I have Boaty's former Revo 75 Tourer. I've been improving her slowly, little by little. Started with steering wheel refurbishment." That's very nice. Russell says, "I paid £400 for a Kia Shima 2. I don't know why. I feel kind of like I want to have a Kia Shima 2. It's the sort of thing that appeals to me. I like kind of weird stuff like that. A blue and black interior. I saw it after a month. Mr. Coleman said to me once that something like that is very, very difficult to find parts for. Now, it's got a lot of Mazda bits in it, Mazda engine, all that kind of stuff, but there will be unique bits on that that'd be hard to find. So it kind of stopped me buying something like that. Pluto Motors Blackpool says, "My first car was a Mark 1 Fiesta. I paid £175 for it in 1996. I imagine that Mark 1 Fiestas, unless they were XR2s or Supersports, were not worth a lot of money in 1996. Mr. John Key Citizen says, "Sierra Sapphire 2-litre GL, £20 in British car auctions with no MOT. That's not a lot, sir, is it? We've got another one from Mr. Coleman coming down here. Yes, I thought Project MGTF. I thought your name was Simon. That's why it's all very confusing tonight. I'm afraid. Simone, I'm afraid we're going to have to skip talking about your car because we don't talk about diesels on this channel. And Mr. Coleman also has just said that he bought a Forbidden Fuel Sierra in 2004 for £13. Yeah, we can't talk about it either, can we? Pluto Motors Blackpool, he says, "Even the XR2 and Supersport were worth peanuts in 1996. Paulie Gautiri says, "I said it before, but I gave £10 for a C registration Audi Coupe 2.2. I don't think they were. I don't think they're worth that anymore. When was that, sir, that you paid £10 for an Audi Coupe? JDM Stone Monkey says, "I forget long ago 1996 was. I was born then." Yes, that's around, if I get this right, 27 years ago. It's quite a long time. Russell Hunter says, "The second cheapest was a £450 Proton Persona Platinum Edition in Burgundy." That sounds quite good. I'll have a Mitsubishi engine in it, that one. 3-speed auto. Yeah, lots of more autos, because the average sort of Proton buyer tended to be a little bit older, so a lot of autos were kind of sold. Matt W says, "My cheapest car. We can't talk about it." Thank you, sir, for your self-censorship. Max says, "My cheapest car I bought was the first. A Mark 1 Peugeot 106 with 2 months MOT for £1. £1? How can you complain at £1? That's completely insane. 2 months MOT as well. What did you do with it then, Max, after you picked up said 106 for £1? You overcharged, were you? Okay. Simone says, "My car was £250. Simone, was your car bought with an MOT? That's not my name. So we sold our 1988 Metro 1.3 in the late 90s, so only 10 years old, what it looked like people would have to pay to get rid of old cars. An MOT of £45. £45? Wow. Yeah, back at that sort of time, scrapyards was sort of actually charging people to take cars off them. It was absolutely insane. Total insanity. No wonder cars were so cheap. Pretty much Blackpool says I was once given a Mark 1 Mondeo for tiling someone's bathroom. Was that with an MOT then? Mr. Coleman has sort of hinted that we might have another edition of Austerity Edition coming up on the channel. We might actually have 2 more coming up on the channel because Mr. Coleman paid £50 last month for a Chevy Matiz with an MOT. The MOT is a bit short, so he's had to do that again. I think, judging by the repairs he's had to do it, the budget has been far exceeded, shall we say. The budget for Austerity Edition is £100 of an MOT. I think he might have actually exceeded that to get it through the guarantee, but never mind. Simon from Project MGTF says, my first car was a £50 Mini 998. Someone had painted it all white. Was that with an MOT, sir? And when was that? Paulie Garcheri says, in 2000, this was the Audi Coupe. It was on someone's drive, wanted it gone, half a tank of fuel in it. Did that have an MOT, sir? This is the qualification. Matt W said the second cheapest car was my first. 1979 Mini 1000 in 1994. That wouldn't be worth anything at all, would it? £450. Simone Classic says, yeah, MOT, excellent, yeah, bargain, £250 Rover 75 with an MOT. I'm sure we can't talk about it. Max says, yes, you get 106. It was a non-runner. Wacky starter motor would get it going. I don't know why that goes going. Maybe Mr. Coleman would be able to tell me why hitting the starter motor gets it going. It was outright dangerous, should have been on the road. Yes, the old classic joke. The MOT must have been kept by Stevie Wonder. I think I've heard that expression many, many times in the last week or so. Henry Green says, you don't see cheap bangers now. Bangers, yes, not cheap, especially at auctions. The thing is that the Clio was bought last year. It was £100 with the year's MOT last year. The Chevy Matiz was bought, I think, this year or something. And there's another one as well that I'm aware of that I might be filming, I think, this week, actually. But they all come from these sort of sources, like, you know, garages you don't want them, or, you know, people who want to sell them to friends and family or something like that. Open market, you don't really find them, and not even so much at the auctions anymore. It tends to be like trade-ins, and, you know, garage will take a car off your hands you don't want anymore and things like that. You know, did a whole video on it earlier this year. Max said when it went back in, it delivered 2 pages of fails. I've still got them somewhere, as well as the only remaining wheel trims on the car. That's probably worth £1. Simon Project MGTF, 10 minutes MOT, paid for that car. Wow. Putting Arterium is out, this crazy Audi Coupe bought in 2000 for, you know, under Austerity Edition money. MOT in 6 months tax. It's insane. Plutimus Blackpool said, yeah, the Mondeo had 2 months MOT on it. I put it through an MOT and sold it as I had a Mark III Cavalier. It was a year older, but in better condition. Goodness gracious me. That's for tiling a bathroom. Mr. Coleman. All repairs cost less than £50. Brake pads were £8. I had some steel for the welding, a second-hand battery in stock. I looked at the dipstick, it was wet, so it's all fine. Oh my gosh. Oh, we love Austerity Edition on this channel. It's absolutely hilarious what the stuff that comes through is. And Simone says that, yes, £250 Rover 75 with 2 months MOT. Russell says the £400 Toyota Carina 1.6 Auto. I got overtaken by a lorry going up the A22 Caterham bypass. Yes, I know the A22 Caterham bypass. Used to drive around there sometimes when we lived in Ewell, which is near Epsom. It took it took slow to a new level. 10 months MOT, £400. Excellent. I bought in 2017 from the original family a 1993 Proton 1.3 MPI GLS saloon. The lady who owned it was the widow of the original owner who bought it new, and it had done 45,000 miles. It wasn't quite in as good condition as the one that Steph drives, who found that in a garage. It wasn't quite as nice as that, but it wasn't actually that bad. The biggest problem with the car was, you know, it had some service rust on top. It wasn't underneath so much. I mean, the car lived in Southend for most of its life, and so there were sort of scabby bits on the roof, and I got the bonnet repainted in matte black. I just happened to meet somebody at Santa Pod one day, and he said he'd do it for me for £75. Just paint the bonnet black, which he did. And it, you know, driving around in an old car like that, if it doesn't match, doesn't really matter. It was hilarious. It was so light. The thing is, like, if you sort of think if I get in an accident, I will actually die in this car. It's so light and everything. It was pretty reliable. The fan belts are pretty bad. There's two of them in one of those Mitsubishi engines, and if you don't change both of them, you get squeaky fan belts. But yeah, it was hilarious. I sold it for more than I paid for it, but I had to put it through an MOT, and so I did lose a bit of money on it. But it was hilarious. I didn't need it really. I just bought it as a bit of a joke because one of my friends had told me that, you know, this lady he, you know, used to kind of go and visit and stuff had the car on the drive, and she, you know, wasn't doing anything to it. I drove it all the way back from Southend to Epsom. The only thing that happened was the thermostat was a bit broken, and so if you drove it for a long period of time, the engine wouldn't heat up properly. It wouldn't hold, you know, the temperature properly on a long run, and also when you came to a halt after running it for a long time, the car would just cut out. It was a fuel injection car. It wasn't going to do the car because it didn't have it. So what we had to do was just kind of either just not actually stop the engine, not come off the accelerator and sort of keep it running, or just kind of restart it. It wasn't the end of the world. Yeah, £200. It's so funny. The insurance cost more than the car. Oh yes, Hayden Mark II Granada. Hello, sir. Paulie Galtieri said there used to be a section of under £250 in Auto Trader. Yep, there did used to be. It was hilarious, wasn't it? That kind of thing. Yeah. Pluto Motors Blackpool says got to go out now. We think of live stream. Have a good night. Yes, good evening to you, sir. Good night. Ross Sander says Persona had dodgy thermostat. It must have been like a common problem with those Mitsubishi engines. I think they were called the Mitsubishi, it's either the Orion or the Sirius. I think it was the Orion engine those were called. And, you know, they've been around since the dawn of time, those engines. They were in the original Hyundai Pony. They were in loads of Protons. They were in the Hyundai Lancer as well, actually, those engines. It's crazy. Mr. Coleman tells the story of how he used to get a Jaguar or a Granada for £30 each back in the day, a Mark II Granada or Series 123 Jaguar XJ, or £50. Obviously, these weren't for anything other than going on a racing track, so you know, weren't for restoration or anything. Sean Cook says my cheapest car was in 1996, £195, a Fiat Panda 750L with the 800cc fire engine. Oh my gosh. No MOT, but it passed with 2 remolds and a service. Gosh. How much was said remold tyres, sir? I'm sure the service wasn't very much. Simon from Lots of XXXIX Cars says, I remember rushing out on Thursday to buy the paper and start scouring Auto Trader. Yeah. Yeah, it was when it came out. I remember Southern Auto Trader was in this area, and you know, all the decent cars would go really, really quickly. I'm sure the traders used to grab those on Thursday morning and just start ringing straight away. Sean Cook says it's an 87 Panda, the one that he bought. It's so funny. That car is less than 10 years old. It's 9 years old in 1996, and yet it was only worth £195. Isn't that insane? I mean, so in 2023, a 2014 Panda, 2014 Pandas aren't worth £195 on the whole, are they? It's crazy. That's what my name says. I did test drive a Gen 2 in 2009 when it was 5 years old. Yeah, they came out actually in 2004, so that was one of the first Gen 2s. I like the looks, but not the inside. The steering wheel was offset. Yeah, the drive position of those is a bit weird. The handling of those is quite good. The engine was the Campro engine, which was Proton's first independently manufactured engine. The other ones up until that point have been Mitsubishi or Renault engines. So yeah, that was interesting. Or if you want to talk about the Proton Tiara, which is basically a rebadged Citroen AX, which is a very strange thing. When the boss of Proton decided that he didn't want to work with Mitsubishi anymore and he wanted to work with another company, and he went to Citroen and said, "We'd like some AXs, please. We'd like to put some badges on them for you." And they sold them in Malaysia, only in Malaysia. But then he died, I think, in like a helicopter accident in the 90s. And so when they needed to renegotiate something with Citroen, the relationship would be lost, and so they continued with Mitsubishi until they started making their own cars. And the first one of those really was the kind of like the Gen 2, which had no other influence, no kind of Mitsubishi platform or engines or anything like that. It was entirely their own work. And then the Satrian Neo was kind of like that too. So Sean Cook, the remold tyres cost £12.50 each. Lovely. Those are probably very safe, aren't they? Simon from Lightweight Cars says, I remember thinking marinas looked good value. I bought a white coupe. All was well until I jacked it up and it went straight through the floor. Oh dear, sir. Bit of corrosion there. Simone from Classic says a second coat of paint has been added. Maybe that's for sills. So Product MGTF, Simon, good night everyone wanting to finish the editing. Yes, I know all about editing, sir. We've done a lot of that in the last few days. Simone says I have to go now. Okay, that's fine. Let's have a swig of this lager. The the only thing that the Proton I had failed the MOT on, when I had to get an MOT on it, was the fact that I'd lent it to a friend and she lost the fuel filler cap. There was still the door was still there, but the little cap, she lost it. And if you don't have a fuel cap, you fail the MOT, as I found out. And I said, "Can you please get me a fuel cap?" And they found a generic one for £10. So that's how much it cost to pass it. I think that's all it was. To get it through the MOT was just putting that on. The door mirror glass wasn't actually attached properly. I'd put duct tape on it, but I just put a bit more duct tape on it for the MOT, just tidied it up, and it was all right. It was fine. Such was the way with really cheap cars, even sort of 5-6 years ago. That's the sort of thing you used to do. Mark II Granada Hayden. Our Granada LX was £20 in 2005 with no MOT, but got it through without much work. Mr. Coleman probably wishes that Mark II Granadas with no MOT was still £20. They are not at all. They are many, many times that. Bodyguard says, I always wanted to see a taxi spec Mark II Granada. Heard it was the most basic of basic Granadas. Yes, they were, absolutely. Many of them were powered by engines we can't discuss, sir. Russell says, have I driven the Perodua? Quite taken with a Perodua Kalisa. So not only have I driven a Perodua Kalisa on the channel, I drove it at Summit Garage, because Summit Garage used to be a Perodua dealer, and John Newey remembers actually selling the Perodua Kalisa used in Jeremy Clarkson's DVD, it's called Heaven and Hell or something, to, I think it was Brian Klein, who was the director of that particular DVD. It came out in 2005. And one of the original cars came back onto the forecourt, and I said, can I drive it? And so I drove it on No Budget Reviews in 2021. It was really strange. And the garage you see where they destroyed the Perodua Kalisa in the video, where Jimmy Clarkson beat it with a hammer, on the roof, things like that. That wasn't Summit Garage, it was somewhere else, I think. So yeah, that's not my name. Says the other thing put me off buying the Gen 2 was there were no dealers after the local one closed down. Yeah, Proton pulled out of the country entirely in 2012, and I did look at buying a Gen 2 with the LPG system. I think I wanted the hatch rather than the saloon. The saloon was called a Persona. But the thing is that the depreciation on them was so bad that it wasn't really worth me kind of getting one of those. It wouldn't offset the cost of you know, depreciation by having an LPG conversion. It wouldn't do that. So I didn't buy one in the end. I'm glad I didn't, because it would have been an absolute nightmare. It was bad enough when I had two Chevy Cruisers, and Chevrolet pulled out about 2015. I think they pulled out of the UK market. So many companies pulled out about between about 2010 and 2015. So many pulled out of our market at the time. James Hibbert says, "You remember the Proton GTI?" Yeah, all the Satria GTI. I absolutely do. Say sort of modified Mitsubishi Colt with a 1.8, I think 133 horsepower engine. The car that is even more interesting to me than the GTI or Satria GTI is a Proton Coupe, the Putra, I think they called those. That was the same kind of basic idea. It was a Mitsubishi Coupe. I can't remember. I think it's called a Mirage Cyborg or something strange in Japan. They did sell them, I think, for a few years. I think they're quite nice. I'd quite like to have a go in a Proton Coupe if I could find one. Simon from Lot 76 Cars says, "There's a Satria GTI on Auto Trader for £10,000. I thought we were talking about Austerity Edition, sir. That's a bit too much money." And that's what my name says. A 2009 Chevy Aveo. I really want to have a go in one of those. I really want to drive that sort of stuff, because that's still really like a Daewoo design. Daewoo was independent for a brief period of time. I really want to have a go in something like that. That'd be fantastic. I love that sort of stuff. I don't, but I do. It's really odd, and I can't explain it. Russell says, "A Proton Coupe, it must be rarer than a Talbot Tagora." No, it's not rarer than a Talbot Tagora. Sorry, I just had a message come through on the phone I'm using. Let's get rid of that. Yeah, a Talbot Tagora is a little bit rarer than a Proton Coupe, but a Proton Coupe is still really rare. Matt W says, "My local football club, Norwich FC, was sponsored by Proton Lotus for a while. There was a mini showroom at the ground that sold Jumbucks and Gen 2s in yellow." Yes, the good old Jumbuck, yeah. They tend to be more common on the Isle of Wight than anywhere else for some sort of reason. I don't know why particularly, but I saw a few when I was on there last September. Few Jumbucks. I think Proton for a while. I think they ended their. I don't remember where. I think their headquarters either in Bristol or it was up in East Anglia. I think it changed some point in the 2000s. So yeah, somebody maybe can tell me where it was at the end. But I think for a time that Proton were based over sort of near Norwich. Paulie Gattieri says, "A Volvo 360 GLE saloon is no longer austerity money." No, sir, but we'd still like to drive a Volvo 360 GLE saloon. It would be fantastic. That's my name says, "You don't want to drive it like an 90s car." It can't be worse than a City Rover. It can't be worse than a Proton Savvy. I've driven all kinds of stuff. Trust me, I've driven Daewoo Sparrows and Perodua Calisas and stuff like that. It really can't be that bad. It really can't be that bad. Russell says, "When I lived in Ashford in Kent, there were no less than 3 Honda Accord coupes in the area." Sir, the Honda Accord coupe was available with a V6 engine, an automatic gearbox, and a beige leather interior. It's the sort of thing we like very much. Even better, it was a Legend coupe, actually. Those are very, very nice. We like those. Right, 43 minutes we've been going. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to say before we end discussion on incredibly cheap cars and strange old Protons? Okay, I think that'll do for this evening. That's not my name. Send me an email, and you know, we can have a go with the Chevy Aveo if you'd like to see it on the channel. My email address is in like the vast majority of all the videos. If the Aveo is rubbish, it doesn't matter. I've driven some really terrible cars in my time. One of the worst ones was the £50 Citroen C3 that Mr. Coleman owned briefly. I assure you, your Aveo is not as bad as the £50 Citroen C3. And with that, thank you ever so much indeed once again for watching this slightly less professional live stream number 39. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment below, and we shall see you again soon for more waffling and rambling.